All right, let's go to our live line right now and join Frank Woodruff. Frank is with an organization called the National Alliance of Community Economic Development. Frank, good afternoon. Welcome to America's Workforce here in Cleveland, Ohio.
Hi, Ed. Thanks for having me.
Okay, appreciate it. Why don't you tell me about this organization? I know I want to talk about predatory lending and foreclosure. Now, is this an organization that deals primarily with that?
Our members do, Ed. We have a network of approximately 2,000 community organizations around the country through our members of state and regional associations, and a lot of them do deal with mortgages and with housing counseling. Some also do economic development work, but we really believe in community-based solutions to the challenges facing neighborhoods and working people.
And where are you based out of?
Washington, D.C.
All right. Have you had a pretty profound effect so far? I mean, this is a horrible crisis in America, but what kind of dent are you making so far?
Slowly but surely, the housing market is making a comeback, but there's still a lot of work to be done. We're taking a four-step approach to, we're advocating, I should say, for a four-step approach. Of those four steps, we have one, but the first step being an economic solution to the crisis. A big part of the problem is that capital is not flowing from financial institutions to borrowers, and so for the foreseeable future, we should all expect to see the Federal Reserve keep interest rates low, and so that's part of the economic solution. There's a legal piece to it, which we are already seeing. Public entities, attorneys general from around the country are filing lawsuits against financial institutions for their misdeeds. The big example being in February when 49 attorneys generals settled with the 5 large financial institutions in America. I think just about 2 weeks ago, I think the city of Cleveland actually was part of a lawsuit against Wells Fargo and SunTrust for targeting, I believe, minority communities with less desirable loan products. And we expect to see more of these settlements going forward. The third step is a political solution. Government, local, state, federal, has to play a role in this, in the foreclosure crisis. There's no way around it. Anyone who tells you differently is not being truthful and is trying to get something out of you. And the most immediate way that the federal government can play a role is by getting serious about a jobs program. It is critical that people who work hard, play by the rules, can find a job that supports their family, and in the context of what we're talking about, is able to pay their mortgage. There's no reason that they shouldn't be able to do that. And so the federal government needs to get serious about a jobs program quickly. And then there's the fourth piece, which is what the NACEDA network plays a role in. There's a real community piece to this. And you may have some listeners out there who are falling behind with their payments, who again worked hard and played by the rules, but maybe they're getting threatening phone calls or letters in the mail, and their financial institution is trying to tell them, there are resources available to help you, but they don't frankly trust their financial institutions, and who can blame them? So the community piece to this is that there are organizations out there in the state of Ohio, particularly, who are trusted, professional, knowledgeable, and can connect borrowers to these resources. So I really encourage anyone out there who's listening who's having trouble with paying their mortgage. There are resources available. There's one of our members, the Ohio CDC Association, ohiocdc.org, has a list of neighborhood community organizations in the state of Ohio, and go to their website, beware of scams. And these services should be for little or no cost. But those are really the four steps to it: economic, legal, political, and there's a community piece.
So you're finding, in your experience, Frank, that a lot of people, when they get served papers on foreclosure, they just freeze up because they got burned and they don't trust anybody. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. And with these legal settlements that I mentioned, by agreement of the settlement, the financial institutions have to make money available, and money and resources are available. But frankly, who can blame them? X bank starts foreclosing on your property, Ed, and then all of a sudden, you're getting phone calls, letters, and then all of a sudden you get one in the mail that says, actually, resources are available to you. I don't know about you, but I'm not very likely to open that letter.
Yeah.
And So neighborhood organizations can really be a trusted go-between and resource.
Yeah. Oh, it's horrible what has happened here. Now you mentioned the legal and I know about the one here in Cleveland with Wells Fargo. Is that money going to the homeowners that got burned? What do you know about that?
Many of the resources are negotiated directly between the borrower and the financial institution, almost all of them. In the case of the large financial settlement with the attorneys general, there was about 10% of the money was set aside for state cash payments. And originally, we were very excited about that as a collection of state associations, but we are finding that many of the states are frankly wasting the money. In the state of Ohio, actually is an exception. They actually did, we believe, a very good thing with their portion of the funds, but in other states, not so much. But yes, the banks are in, but between the piece of it that's between the borrower and the bank, yes, they are supposed to be. $17 billion out of the $25 billion settlement are resources for principal reduction and low interest refinancing for borrowers who are underwater on their homes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's move to Countrywide. Now, I believe it was not too long ago the Department of Justice determined that Countrywide Financial discriminated on the basis of race and national origin against qualified. And the key word here is qualified African American as well as Hispanic borrowers. This was during a period of 2004 to 2008. And essentially, what they did, they charged them higher fees and interest rates than non-Hispanic white borrowers. Where is that right now, Frank? What's being done to satisfy that situation?
As I said earlier, there will continue to be lawsuits that are settled between public entities and borrowers. One frustration we have had is that because these are court cases, there is an assumption that because these are negotiated by public entities and attorneys general, that there is a level of accountability and transparency in the settlement. And that I'm just as guilty of that as anyone. We need to start to seriously challenge that assumption. So, frankly, to answer your question, that I'm not sure with Countrywide, but I can tell you that the reason that financial institutions and mortgage servicers do anything is because they think it can turn them a profit. I mean, very simply, that's what they do. And it's important, and I think you alluded to this, that they are targeting minority communities and poor communities. They're also targeting seniors and young home buyers and people, in fact, in short, people who didn't know or couldn't fight back. And one myth out there is that especially in the state of Ohio, is that this mortgage crisis was caused by people who bought too big of homes. They got overextended. Well, that's not really where it all started. That was a piece to it. Mm-hmm. But for those who are homeowners in the mid to late 90s, you may remember getting things in the mail offering refinancing opportunities for less desirable loan products. Sometimes 2, 4, 8 times a week you get things in the mail.
Right.
And you get it the first week, you ignore it. The second week, you ignore it. But once you fall into a troubling situation, you lose your job, you get sick. Those refinancing offers start to look pretty tempting, and that's really where it all started. In short, they did it because they thought they could turn profits. But we're seeing a decade later that was misguided.
Well, fast forward to today. How are we today? Have the banks changed their policies? Are they making those generous loans now, or perhaps maybe they've tightened up too much and nobody can even get a loan? What are you hearing?
I think it's a little bit of everything. I think the banks are slowly changing. They're under some of these settlement agreements. They are forced. They are obligated to change. How exactly they're changing, honestly, I'm not sure. I have asked, and I get a we'll let you know. It's not exactly clear. I think they have made some changes. Certainly with the principal reduction, that is something banks have not done in the past, and they are beginning to do that. Then these legal settlements will, as I said, continue to come. But the way we hold these financial institutions accountable historically has been to organize communities. And I don't mean to relive the 2008 campaign, but it's really what has held them accountable in the past. The most famous example was back in the 1970s through redlining. I think some of your listeners may be familiar with this, but basically what it was financial institutions would grab a map, put it on a table in their boardrooms, and draw a red box around a community. And they would say, we are not going to invest in this community, this part of the community, because we don't think we can make money. We're not going to get mortgages. We're not going to extend lines of credit to small businesses. And the ironic part is that in some cases, inside that red box was their bank. And so communities got organized with the help of some labor unions and others, and said, we're not going to take this anymore. If you are going to accept deposits in our neighborhood, you are going to invest in our neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And from that was born the Community Reinvestment Act. And that's probably the most historical example of how neighborhoods have been organized. More recently, we have the Dodd-Frank Act, which is politically divisive. We'll hear the presidential candidates talking about it a lot. But it formed the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and they are accepting complaints through their website about less than desirable mortgage products being peddled in communities on their website via consumerfinance.gov.
Frank, I'm looking at my clock. Can you stick around for another segment with us?
Absolutely.
Okay, real good. Frank Woodruff joining us on our live line. He's with the National Alliance of Community Economic Development. Their website is naceda.org. That's NACEDA.org. And also, we got Ed Fitzgerald coming up all on Labor Radio, 1490 WERE, back in a few minutes. AAA Electric and Smart Wire Incorporated is a local family-owned business that utilizes only the best-trained professional electricians in the industry. So we are able to provide expert electrical and teledata services for all residential and commercial construction, upgrades, and maintenance. Fully licensed and bonded, AAA Electric and Smart Wire only employs a highly skilled workforce of union electricians trained through the prestigious local union joint apprenticeship and training program, so they can power Northeast Ohio while assuring only the safest work sites. And with AAA Electric and Smart Wire, every customer, no matter how big or small, is guaranteed the same courtesy and professionalism demanded by AAA Electric and Smart Wire on all of our electrical installs and repairs, including anything from network cable and phone systems to security and fire alarms. So contact AAA Electric and Smart Wire, Inc. for electrical estimates. The number is 440-521-9942. For all of your residential or commercial electrical and data needs, that's AAA Electric and Smart Wire. 440-521-9942. As Cleveland's unemployment woes continue, the city's prestigious public college, Cleveland State University, is skirting local regulations and allowing out-of-town construction workers to build its new campus village, taking much-needed work away from local construction craftspeople, qualified residents who need the work and care about building the city right. To learn more and voice your concern about local construction jobs going to non-Cleveland workers, visit protectclevelandjobs.org and help protect Cleveland jobs now. That's protectclevelandjobs.org. The United Steelworkers of America represent over 70,000 workers in the state of Ohio. Steelworker members enjoy the benefits of some of the best contracts of any workers in the world. Many of your friends, neighbors, and relatives are members of one of the most effective Democratic unions in our country. With the pressures unorganized workers are under in today's economy, you need to join them. So call the Steelworkers Organizing Office at 216-292-5683 or toll free at 1-800-443-3752. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the law firm of Clamaco, Wilcox, Pecca, Tarantino, and Garofoli, committed to clients and community and protecting the rights of individuals for more than 35 years. Hey, the Building Trades newspaper, which is the Cleveland Citizen, reminds us that good union members are always on the lookout for union-made products. So, if you have a business with union goods or services, consider advertising in the oldest labor publication in the country. That's right. That's the Cleveland Citizen, and their phone number is 216-861-4283. That's 216-861-4283. Possible thunder showers tonight, sunshine tomorrow, a high of 84. Let's go back to our live line. Frank Woodruff joining us out of Washington. He's with an organization called the National Alliance of Community Economic Development. The website is naceda.org, NACEDA.org. We've been talking about predatory lending, foreclosure, kind of figuring out ways to wiggle out of this mess. A lot of community involvement can do that. Frank, I was reading your bio at the beginning of the show. I see. Well, I'm very impressed, and I see you spent a lot of time in Wisconsin. Worked on a couple of campaigns in the fundraising office of U.S. Senator Russ Feingold. What a great guy he was. But I bet you got a lot of comments with what happened in that state in the last 18 months. I would imagine, right?
Absolutely. And, one thing that struck me, well, just back up just a second. I grew up there. Some of your listeners may be familiar, particularly with good Midwestern people, be familiar with Wisconsin Dells. That's where I grew up, in a small town right next to it called Lake Delton. We like to think we are smaller, but we have all the attractions, if you're familiar with the Dells. But yeah, I would say, as I watched from afar the last 2 years or so, what happened there, I couldn't be prouder of what communities did there, and what working people did to fight what is truly an injustice. And I know that the word injustice is thrown around pretty loosely, but in this case, it really is what it was. And in the end, the recall of the governor didn't work out the way we had all wanted. But I couldn't be prouder of the efforts people put in there. It warms my heart.
Yeah. Well, I know your background is community involvement, and what comes to mind, though, and Wisconsin was a perfect example of this, is the amount of money that's in political campaigns ever since Citizens United. We're seeing, Ohio, as you well know, is a battleground state. I mean, there's commercial after commercial after commercial. We're being bombarded, and it's just July. I mean, we got, well, I believe it's about less than 100 days until the general election, but nonetheless, how does that affect you as a community organizer? And when you're up against that kind of those big bucks, the big corporate bucks, how do you position yourself, Frank?
One thing we are seeing is very early on in this campaign, we're seeing a lot of negative ads. And from my political experience, my campaign background, what that tells me is that the incumbent is in a lot of trouble. The earlier that an incumbent has to go negative means that their polling is telling them that they have to create people are not seeing a difference between them and their opponent. And the longer that these negative attack ads go on, the more disenfranchised voters and communities feel about their public leaders, and about their community situation, and about their own situation. And so it's a real challenge.
Those negative ads do work, and it's interesting you brought that up, because I'm hearing from the Obama campaign they're going to pull away from going negative and talk about what he's going to do in his next 4 years in office. So I take it that's a pretty good strategy coming from you?
I hope that's based on something that they're seeing, that they don't feel that they need to go negative anymore. At least that's what I hope. Generally, you don't go negative in a campaign unless you have to, because it's a double-edged sword. You draw a distinction between you and your opponent, but it also has a chance to come back and bite you.
Gotcha.
So I hope that's a good thing.
I hope so, too. All right, let's get back to the topic here, and we're talking about rebuilding the dream of home ownership. And what we need to get back to the basics here, because owning a home, that was your dream. That's what we all try to do. We raise our family. We have equity in our home. Maybe we could pass that home to future generations. And then all of this seems to have blown up, and now we got to put all the pieces back together. You are a big advocate of community. I know that's what it's all about. That's what your organization is all about. What's your suggestion here, Frank, to people, especially Cleveland, because Cleveland got hit pretty hard in this whole crisis? What's your best suggestion here for those that are on the brink right now?
Well, what Nacita firmly believes is that our own economic strength and each of our own individual quality of life is a direct result of the strength in each and every community in the country. And strong communities are based in a strong small business sector. Obviously, people having a stable place to call home, access to education, a government that truly works for the people. And in short, Senator Wellstone, I believe, from Minnesota, we all do better when we all do better. But I like how you put it, that it kind of blew up, and we're at least in a position that we have to start putting the pieces back together. And the most immediate piece is, again, jobs. We need a serious government jobs program that stimulates the private sector, and then infuses some resources into communities. But I think what's most important for each person who's listening to understand is that we're all in this together. Even if you are someone who is not struggling to pay your mortgage, but maybe could be very possible that your neighbor is. And if your neighbor doesn't have a stable place to call home, they could possibly use. People who have a stable place to home use fewer social services, fewer law enforcement resources. Their children do better in school. If my neighbor's child and my child go to the same school, but one has problems at home, it has an effect on the quality of education for the other child, and because their parents can no longer be productive members of society. And I'm preaching to the choir a little bit on a show in Cleveland. I don't need to tell your listeners what it's like to have abandoned homes in communities. Last year, I had a chance to go to Youngstown, Ohio, and tour a neighborhood organization there called the Youngstown Neighborhood Development Corporation. I strongly suggest have them on your show sometime. They do tremendous work. We went in and spoke to a staff person there, and a man told me, that 46% of the living units in Youngstown, Ohio, are vacant. And I thought, wow, geez, 46%, that's a lot. But then we get in the car and we drive through the Idora neighborhood of Youngstown, Ohio, and literally every other house is boarded up and abandoned. That has of course, affects the property value of the people who are still there. But abandoned homes breed crime. There's serious public health concerns with pests and other aspects to it. Homes are the foundation upon which modern society is built, and there's an economic component there that you alluded to. Is that in this case, home ownership is the ladder by which the economic ladder by which people climbed for the past generation or two. Owning a home was what you got you from lower class to middle class or middle class to upper class. And we are seeing that change. I think the American dream is evolving. I don't think home ownership will be as big of a piece as it was in the past, but that's okay. Mm-hmm. If you don't own a home, it allows you more flexibility to move, to take maybe a higher paying or better job or more exciting job. So I think that's evolving. It's certainly not going away, but it is evolving.
Yeah, a lot of people are of the opinion that the next generation is not going to have it as good as this current generation. Do you feel the same way?
I like to think of myself as maybe a bit younger and part of that next generation. I don't feel that way. I believe the American spirit will shine through, and we will see through this. I absolutely believe that certainly, my children and their children will have more opportunities than I did, because that's what American working people do.
Gotcha. All right, Frank, thank you so much for joining us here in Cleveland, Ohio. Again, Frank is with the organization National Alliance of Community Economic Development. The website is naceda.org, NACEDA.org. And I take it if I go there, I want to find out some more information about a local community, they're all linked there? Is that how that works?
We link them state by state. And if you want to go straight to the state of Ohio, go to ohiocdc.org. Gotcha.
All right, and you can get all the help you need. Frank, thank you so much. Keep up the good work over there, all right?
Thanks, Ed.
All right. Again, Frank Woodruff of the National Alliance of Community Economic Development. He raises a really good point, too. If you get those foreclosure papers, don't run from them just because you're ticked off at the banks and all that, because they're going to take your home. There's a lot of organizations out there. We featured the mediation program the county offers, and there's a lot of success stories out there, but don't run. Don't run. That's the best advice we can leave you with. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Ed Fitzgerald's going to give us a county update, all on Labor Radio, 1490 WERE.